Hey Mark, I'm Lorraine Maher. I'm a creative practitioner, and I'm saying that even rolling my eyes because I am at a place where I'm even thinking, what is a creative practitioner? Like, what do I do? What's my art form? Because I work across a multitude of art forms and genres, and I think that for me, I'm exploring right now exactly what my role is within arts and culture. And I'm quite excited by that because I know that there's lots of other people like me who who I guess are fitting into this new portfolio career. In that we don't always have to just wear one cap. What I do know is that all my work is about representation, inclusion, giving voice to a hidden voice, and and pushing through. Really being who we are, and bringing whatever we have to the table, and knowing that that is always high quality. Because we are the experts. When as an artist, when you create something, you're the expert in what you create. So for me, that is what's really important. That excuse me, that we get to say what we want to say, and that audiences really connect with that and can really appreciate and interact with it in some kind of way. And it gives an opportunity for a piece of work to be ever evolving, and new every time you go and see it. If you go and you experience something 10 times, that you feel like you take something away each time.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying that obviously we go back, so we know each other for quite a while, and we'll explain that in a minute. But also this conversation, you were kind of one of the first people due to be on the Access Chats about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and for many different reasons we couldn't put it together. So obviously the landscape, the social world landscape, has kind of changed hugely from both pandemic and what's going on, well, both in America and around the world at the moment. I mean, I'm going to get to that, but I think I just wanted to say that our conversation around representation is part of a residency that you've started a few months back in relation to this. So it's unfortunately become very prescient, the conversations that we are having. Lorraine, can I ask you, just before we get on to that, when you were a young one, like, was the arts were you always into the arts? It was kind of that part of your life growing up.
Well, it's interesting that you say when I was a young one, because am I not still a young one, Mike?
Sorry, young
one. No, I know what you're saying. So the answer is no. And I'm being really kind of tentative about saying no, because I would have been told no, so I would have believed no. But of course I was. I think that everyone that's born in an Irish family is already born into the arts. We're great storytellers. We always have, the sing song, whether it's through a session or whether it's through church or something. We all have the sing song. Poetry is such a massive part of our culture. We all have that access, but what we don't have often, or I know certainly I definitely didn't have it as a child, was that notion that that was actually a job, or you could have a job out of that, or that there's some benefit, there's some greater benefit in in all the skills that the arts gives you. In terms of confidence or team building or negotiation skills, there was never a narrative around that. In fact, my mother had no idea what I do. Even, rest her soul, she passed away a few years ago. I remember bringing her, at the time I was leading the community outreach at the Roundhouse in London, and I remember bringing her to see the building. She had no idea. She just couldn't even connect what my job was in this massive space, even though she watched it on TV. She watched the concerts on TV, but she couldn't really connect the two. She just thought that it's a bit show-offy, it's a bit show-offy, or that you're above your station in some kind of way because you're hobnobbing with someone. As opposed to, actually, this is something that I love. But I do remember being maybe 11 or 12, and a school friend of mine, Sharon McGrath, and we used to dress up as pensioners. And you know, and we'd entertain people. So something that was there. But I would say even deeper than that, Mark, what I realized as I've gotten older is that particularly theatre and the arts became something that was second nature, because I wore a lot of masks as a child and I hid a lot of what I was really feeling. So I became really good at putting on the smile, or putting on the face that said I'm okay, or acting like I was blending into this, you know, to everybody else, or that I was fitting in, or that I wasn't hurt by remarks that were made, or that I could never see myself in anything that I saw on the telly unless it was the image of a bare-chested woman, or a savage, or a maid. Or, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. So growing up, we had the Amateur Operatic Society in our town. And that society is still going, and they do great work in terms of entertaining everyone at the town. And certainly as a child, there would have been I wouldn't have seen a place for me within that. But I was thinking even more so today, because even when I was thinking that, I was thinking, is that a class thing? Is that just because we came from a certain class and I felt like that there wasn't a role for us within that? Because at the time, you know, a lot of the people that owned the shops and things, they were part of that. So they were seen, you know, when we looked at the kind of class, they were the ones that had the status at that time. And so I you know, I had to challenge myself and think, was it just that? But actually it wasn't, because even if I was accepted in that way, what role would I have played? You know, there just wasn't any roles for anyone that looked like me within that. I mean, that I think has changed somewhat. I wouldn't say it's changed like, you know, massively. We know what all the challenges are on stages in Ireland with representation. That, yeah, we can talk about that also in a little while. Yeah. But I certainly just didn't see a place for me within all of that. And I fell into the arts market. It didn't fall into me, you know. And I left school young, didn't have great qualifications and stuff. And I probably thought at that stage, I remember, you know, when I was very young, wanting to be a nun, because that was the only thing that I thought at the time. I grew up at a time where I was the only mixed race person around, and my mother was unmarried. And even at you know, at the time when I grew up, even that was a massive taboo, to marry the child of an unmarried mother, because you wouldn't really know, you know, who that person was. And I remember from being really young thinking, no one is going to want to marry me because I don't fit within this kind of structure. So I'm going to have to become a nun. Like, I remember having those thoughts, and having the conversation with a nun who told me I definitely was never going to fit, and I should think about something else. And I was, you know, highly insulted, because I used to read at mass and everything at that time. And actually, that is all part of it, Mark. You know, when you think about being able to stand in front of crowds of people and be able to read. And I often joke now with my students, because whenever there's a show on or we go to perform, I always get this really windy tummy beforehand. And I you know, and I often joke with them, because I remember reading at mass on a Christmas and farting on the altar, and it being heard throughout the mic. And I've never really, you know, when I think back of childhood and all the horrendous things, that was something that I never forgot. But it always manages to break the ice for people before they get on stage, which, you know, it was great. Yeah, when I look back, Mark, it was. But I would say, even Mark, even as an adult working in the arts, there has been times I felt like imposter syndrome. And what I mean by that is that there was often times that I was in places and I'd listen to people talk about, you know, Meisner, or, you know, they'd be talking about all these theories. I mean, obviously, I now know what all of that's about. And actually, I remember landing a role of education manager in a theatre company and thinking, you know, I didn't come through a traditional route. I came through a really non-traditional route, but being really different to lots of my peers that held the same roles. And now, you know, over those years, I can see that as my advantage. But in my younger years, I would have very much seen it as a disadvantage, because of been so used to being othered and on the outskirts, not really knowing how to fit in that. And I think, you know, over the years, we've all heard of the Beckies, and I just felt that there was a time within the arts that the arts was just full of you know, you'd go into an organization, and although that there was diversity in terms of ages, sizes, yeah, that's probably where it ended. Everyone was the same. Everybody thought the same kind of way. And I often, you know, thought when I come into those spaces and I think, am I wrong in my thinking, in my creativity, in the way that I'm doing things? Actually, I'm not really appreciating that that's really what was needed, was that splash of color to really bring things alive and to be able to bring something different to the table. And I'm delighted, you know, we're here years later where lots of other organizations are feeling like now the light bulb is switched on and we can see the benefit of having workforces that represent the communities that we work within and that we represent and that we, you know, that we stand for, whether it's local or central or, you know, within the country. It's really important that we're representing all of those voices, and all those other little kids are feeling like there's a place within that. And
yeah.
Because that person doesn't like to look at this, doesn't mean they're not going to like to look at this. You know, there's audiences for everything. I've learned that over the years.
Yeah. Lorraine, go back. Was it Carrick that you kind of...
Oh, I'm from Carrick-on-Shore. I'm from Carrick-on-Shore, County Tipperary. I'm really surprised I haven't mentioned that before now. I'm very proud to come from Carrick-on-Shore.
You're a tip woman.
Well, I am, but also there's like some amazing creatives that have come from our town. You know, it is a really small town, but there's so much creativity. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about going home, Mark, because no matter where you go, you're going to hear music. You know, in a way, like here, I live in London, and I live in Camden Town, which is just, you know, full of kind of live music and stuff. And you see, when you watch young bands when they're rehearsing and waiting to get that gig, you know, whether it's Dublin Castle or, you know, Enterprise or something, and you're waiting for them to get that gig. But then you go home and you just see these bands that are out every week and you're just given live music for free. It's just there for you to absorb. And there's some brilliant musicians, young DJs, you know, just the vibrancy kind of the town. But you know, Mark, within all of that, there's a direct provision centre in Carrick. And like, I knew that was there for years because it's been there certainly from, I feel sure that's been there from the 90s. And it's based where I used to, when I was in school, the nuns used to live in it was a nun's house. It was kind of a gated house. And we'd go there for study in the evening and, you know, you couldn't open your mouth, you'd have to have your head down. And so all my feelings of that place are really like being stunted and it was really bleak. And that's where that community of people are living. And I think even, you know, so my views of that space from going home over the years, that ate away at me for quite a long time of kind of feeling like I had to be doing something. And I remember my friends in London, because there was no one really at home that I could talk to about how I was feeling about that. But, you know, when I'd come home, whenever I'd go home and I'd come back and I'd be saying, you know, I've seen the groups of people that are living in that space. I can't remember what it's called. You know, I've seen the people that live in there and they don't even say hello to me. Like I'm saying hello to them. They don't say hello to me. And it's, you know, and feeling really stressed out about that and thinking, how, you know, are they feeling that isolated that even when a friendly face is saying hello, that, you know, that they're having to navigate all of that. Are you actually even friendly? Are you even a friendly face? And they've been there for years. It was closed down, I think, I don't want to give the wrong date, but it opened again in 2017. And I don't even think that some of the people that live in our town even actually understand that that's a direct provision centre. I don't think they know that it's the, you know, the refugees live there, but I don't think that they have a full understanding of what direct provision is and what that means. And so often it's looked on like, should they get the best of everything? They, you know, they get a cab up to the hospital, or they'll get this or they'll get that. there's no understanding of the fact that actually they're not able to cook, or they might be living on less than you're giving your kid to go and buy McDonald's. They're living with their family on that. But equally, I mean, I don't even really want to get massively political, Mark, but I just think, why are the governments, within our town, I've known men who are our age who have never worked in our town, not because they don't want to work, but because there is no work. There is nothing. The town needs more resources. The town themselves and the people within the town do so much to try and bring up the town. When I look at they put on an amazing St. Patrick's Day parade, or the Clancy Brothers Festival now is happening within the town every year to try and, bring some tourism to the town. But then, we get rain that gets washed out, or like now, this year, that's not going to happen. And when you think about the knock-on effect that has on the town, then you bring 80 to 100 other people into the town that you don't properly introduce to anybody within a small town of probably about 10,000 people. Most families will know, or if they don't know each other, they know someone, or the kids go to school with someone. And then you put a whole community of people in, no introductions, no understanding of whatever. Of course that those things are going to rub along. Of course that there's going to be some kind of, not massive friction, because I have to say, within the years, the majority of the people in the town are very welcoming. And I say the majority because there's also a minority within that town that are just out and out racists. And I'm just going to call it what it is, Mark, because that is what it is. And I've seen it and I've heard it over the years. And I know even, there was times when my mother would even say to me, why are you always causing trouble? Why are you always causing trouble? Because I want to stand up for myself. And then I find myself, even with my own children, telling them, stop, when someone calls them the N-word when they're driving past because they're standing on the side of the road. And I'm saying to them, stop, don't, because I don't want, people looking at them like, here we go again. This is what they don't see the perpetrator, they see the victim, but the victim becomes the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And so for years I didn't feel even comfortable to have my own voice seen within that, even if it was in a creative way. And I think when I created #I'mIrish, that was 2016 when I first created the first piece of work. That was really, I was feeling really, really frustrated at that time. And it's funny, isn't it? Because when you think about the straw that broke the camel's back, it was going into the Irish Centre, which I'd never, I remember coming to Ireland myself in late 80s when I first come to London, and someone telling me about the Irish Centre. And I remember going in there and again, feeling complete exclusion from that Irish space. And people kind of looking at me because my accent was still really strong at that time. And this is even interesting in itself, Mark, because people now look at me and they say, but you don't sound Irish. I mean, I think when I go home, I think I sound very Irish. I think when I go home, I hear exactly what I heard when I left. But I know there was a period in time when I came, and I was still a teenager. And I tried really hard to wash away all the Irishness from me, because I felt so excluded from being Irish and arriving in London in communities of people of Afro-Caribbean descent and just feeling like I was fully accepted. Like nobody questioned why I looked the way I did. No one even questioned the fact that I sounded different to everybody else. I wasn't questioned, but I went into Irish spaces and was always questioned about why I sounded like that, questioned about why I looked like that. So rather than to continually put myself through that, I stepped away from it. And then in 2016, going into the Irish Centre and seeing an exhibition of creatives, and it is a lovely exhibition. It is a lovely exhibition. But it really pissed me off, Mark. Like it really pissed me off because I was thinking, here I am again. And the interesting thing at the time, there was a lady behind the bar who wasn't Irish. And I remember thinking, okay, so it's okay that we're serving behind the bar, but we're not, but people who are Irish and look like the lady that's behind the bar, we're not represented on the walls. Like, what's going on? what's going on. And I, you know, the amazing Gary Dunn, who's just like so full of heart and openness and connectivity. I mean, he is everything that we want to know. You know, when we think about great people in Ireland, he's it. And was really welcoming and really understanding of what I was saying, and you know, and said, well, all right, let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. And then I thought, and I was still, you know, my back was still up a little bit at the time, even though I was hearing, yeah, let's make it happen. So it's like, well, let's piss you off even more. We're going to do it as part of Black History Month, because, you know, because it was really, I really wanted to have a moment that said, there's Black people in Ireland. We've been there for centuries. We've been there for centuries. And in every piece of literature, and I had done my bloody research. I should have a PhD on this, Mark, because the amount of unraveling that I did on, you know, the embassies across the world, even embassies that are in African countries. At the time, all of the outward pictures all looked of a Caucasian race of people that were Irish. And I was like, hold on. So in the United Ireland, we've got 6.5 million people. When we look at people of Irish descent across the world, we've got 80 million people. So we've gone all over the world. Does it not make sense that we don't all look white? Does that not make sense? And we hear Irish people all the time loving us all across the world, loving us all. So why is it then that you can love us until you see a little bit of brown, and then then all of a sudden, I should know, you know, you can't be. I mean, I got to make a Mimi t-shirt, because, you know, the trolls tell me all the time, you're not. And they really go out of their way, Mark, to send me an email that says, you're not. You know, like it gets quite entertaining. I've gone way off the question.
Sorry, can I just say though, sorry, I mean, actually people go out of their way to email you to tell you you're not Irish.
Oh my God! So one of these days I'm going to show you the list of people that go out of their way to email me, make videos about me, use my image in videos that about nationalism in Ireland. I get really quite badly trolled, but I've got really good at blocking. They just become a bit annoying, because there are times where they have these kind of targeted attacks.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you need to just lock off for a little while. The thing that they don't know is all of that is just fuel for me, Mark. Like I just lap all of that up. When you've been given something your whole life that energizes you, these idiots are not the thing that's going to stop me. I mean, they think by saying you're not, like, bring something new, bring something a bit innovative. No, I don't, just in case that they are listening. I'm not going to look at it anyway. I've learned to delete it. I see you before you see me. We're block, delete. I'm not getting locked into that. That's just a waste of time for me, Mark. And what I'm really about is about raising the bar. I'm about transparency and showing and high quality, Mark. It's about us consistently bringing those faces, because the thing is, and I really hope there's no backlash anywhere from what I'm going to say, Mark, but the church in Ireland has a big role to play in for me, racism. And that goes back to the narratives that we were fed as children. I remember being told by, you know, I remember I said I used to read in mass, so I spent a lot of time in the church and around the nuns. It was also, you know, I was going to say unfortunate for my family, but how could I ever be unfortunate? But my mother's first cousin was ordained as a priest around the same time I was born. So I was reminded quite often about the shame that I brought, not anyone else, the shame that I brought on my family when I was just about to say his name. He's now a canon in Ireland, so I won't go there with his name. You know, but I was often reminded about the shame that I brought on that family because of. Now that didn't come from him, that came from his colleagues within the church. But equally, the only narratives that I was ever told about the Black community or those of African descent is that they were all starving. You know, and this is what we were told as children in Ireland. We were told that children in Africa were starving. What we weren't told was about the 50 odd countries that make up the African continent. Like we were, even in geography, we weren't taught that. We were taught about Africa. You know, we were given our Irish history. We were given probably even more bloody English history. We were given that, but we weren't given anything outside of that. We weren't even directed in the field into the right direction of being able to learn more about anything outside of who we were. And bearing in mind, in those days, people didn't travel as much as they do now. Or we saw sportsmen. So we saw like Muhammad Ali. I don't even think there was any kind of, you know, there was definitely no Usain Bolts around at the time, but there was boxers. And again, you know, when you think about all of the connotations that there was about boxers, there was kind of hints at the time when, because I remember having like friends who had cousins that had come over from England, and I'd listen, particularly when they'd be listening to soul music, and I remember hearing about like the Notting Hill Carnival. But hearing the word even carnival, I thought that was fun fairs, because for us in Ireland, you know, the carnival was the bumpers or whatever. So I didn't even understand what that was. And people couldn't, you know, when people would come on holidays, they talked to me. I mean, I was probably like 11, 12, but they talked to me like I understood, you know, what they were talking about, because they looked at me like some of the mates that they had in school and thought I'd understand about all this culture, but I didn't. And even now, when people say to me, but aren't you proud of your other culture? I'm like, which other culture are you referring to? Because I happen to have Nigerian DNA. I don't, you know, the only thing I know about that culture is what I've learned myself over the last few years. Excuse me. I grew up with Irish culture. That's all I knew. And so every part of me is Irish, you know, is Irish. I mean, the interesting thing is, even at home for us, our local paper is called The Nationalist. And it's only, I was talking about, you know, because I talk quite a lot about the Nationalist. I was buying The Nationalist, you know, until a few years back when a friend of mine was like, hello, you know. But I'm like, but that's our local newspaper. My brother plays hurley, you know, sometimes we see his team in the newspaper, because that's all there was. And then, you know, when I heard about the rise of right-wing politics in Ireland and seeing, excuse me, that just kind of reminded me of the realness of things that I've experienced, Mark.
Yeah.
And, you know, I often talk about racism that I experienced as a child, and often hearing things said that at that age I didn't even understand what it meant. I was part of a group of friends that would say eeny, meeny, miny, mo, ketchup by the toe. That was me that was saying that. It was, when I was a teenager, there was kind of like a saying, you know, if someone was excluded for something, they'd say, what do you think, what, am I black? That's what you'd be listening to. And I'd be like, no, but I am. And this is from very close. This is not even like from further afield. But and it's taken years for people to even realize that there was something wrong with that. That you know, that wasn't acceptable. That's not acceptable. Or seeing people at fancy dress parties dressed up like as Bob Marley. I'm like, and thinking it's okay that they're painting their face to look like the color of my skin. Like that's not okay. But people sometimes don't even see that as racism. And the thing is these are the people that would be saying, lads, that's wrong now. You know, that would be looking at that video and saying, Jesus, that's a disgrace. But come here, I tell you.
Yeah.
You know, and this is why when I think about what's going on in the world right now, I feel numbed from it, Mark. I feel really numbed from it. My cousin was here the other day, who's also mixed, and she said to me that a friend of hers had asked her as a mixed race person, how many of her friends and family had reached out to see if she was okay. And I think I feel even more numb by that, Mark, than a lot of stuff that I've seen, because it made me realize that in my years, I'm in my 50s, no one in my family has ever asked me if I'm okay. No one. has ever asked me in relation to racism. No one has ever asked me if I'm okay. And it's not until the day before yesterday did even one of my and I can't even say friends, because it's somebody that I know in a work capacity, an amazing man, John Burns, and I have to call him out. He writes for The Stage here in the UK, and has got a beautiful wife, Lola. But he sent me a message on Twitter, literally to ask me, "Am I okay?" And Mark, I cried like a baby when I got the message, because it's making me emotional even thinking about it.
Yeah. Because
it's the first time in my life that someone has actually related what's going on and asked me if I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then the next day I got a beautiful message from our own Neve at Access, a personal message, asking me the same thing. And yesterday another message from my friend Kirsten, who I've worked with, asking me if I'm okay, and if there's anything that she can do to support.
Yeah.
And when I think about the amount of people that I know, Mark, the amount, I grew up in Ireland where thousands of people who are Caucasian, and I'm sure that they probably talk about it when I'm not around. I'm sure they do, because I know that I've often met friends, school friends, that have said to me, "Oh, you had it hard. You had it hard." Or cousins who've said, "We've had it hard." But no one's ever asked me how I feel about it. No one's ever asked me how I've managed to remain resilient in the face of everything that is just like thrown at you constantly. Yeah. I remember even years ago coming home from my uncle's funeral, and we were on a coach, and I was thinking, what's going on while we're on the coach? But maybe because there was a lot of us, and I've got 4 sons, and they were younger at the time, and I had them all on the coach, and this was the time before passports and whatever on the coach. And I remember the coach being held up because I couldn't produce passports for all of the kids. I didn't need passports, but I couldn't produce them for all of the kids. And my cousin, my white Irish cousin, was at the back of the bus. And it's only when he was standing up and saying, like, "What's going on? They're Irish. Look at my name, Ma. My name's Ma." And interestingly, like my kids have double-barreled names. So, and we thought about that because of, and he was like, they're as Irish as the rest of us. They're as Irish as, she's Irish. But I remember the embarrassment that I felt on that bus on that day, and thinking about what my children must have felt on that day. And we finally got through, but just that's the kind of incident that nobody on that bus would have looked at and thought that's racist.
Yeah.
But that's systemic racism that we're dealing with all the time. It's the systemic racism that says that when somebody comes in for a job interview, they don't look like immediately they feel like we can't employ this person. Or someone that I would feel like I've grown up with my whole life, and I feel like I have love for this person, but watching them in a shop telling people, "Go back home. Go back home." And don't you think that's going to affect me as I'm standing beside them? Or being told, "Sure, you're one of us. So because I'm one of us, what is even one of us?" Or someone that says to me, "Sure, look at you, you'd pass now." Like they're giving me a compliment. Like, what the? I get told that quite a lot, Mark. "Sure, you'd pass now." Is that supposed to be something that I'm grateful for? Passing as what? As what? And I find myself even more and more, I've got a pinpoint, and I'm sure people will recognize even who I'm talking about, and so I'm being cautious even. But I remember, and this is a few months ago, being somewhere with a friend of mine, and we were somewhere that I wouldn't have been able to get away from there that night, let's just put it that way. And the person started talking about the blacks and that live up the road. And having the debate, and feeling within it, like, how far do I take this? How far can I take this? How far can we go? How far do we have to go for someone to really understand what we're saying? I remember even in my own town, in a house around the corner. I'm not even going to say where it is. And again, sitting there, and the husband saying that they wouldn't want their daughter, their son marrying a foreigner. And you know what I'm talking about, because the wife would say no, they don't agree. But but the person's looking at me saying, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? You agree with me, don't you? You know what I'm talking about. You agree, don't you? And it's the kind of constantness of having to speak on behalf of every person in the world constantly, or educate people. Like, there's so many resources out there at the moment, and people, and I'm the first one even to say ask, so I'm probably even being hypocritical saying this, Mark, but sometimes it gets tiring. Ask me how you can help, and then I'm happy to point you in the direction. Ask me. The thing is, Mark, I see there's so many tweets and stuff that are out there saying fund. You know how many times, like, #IamIrish is an unfunded, for the best part. There's been little bits of money we've got for different projects, but for the best part, it's unfunded, run by volunteers. Do you know how many times I've asked for volunteers? And yet, the amount of times we've put out fundraising campaigns, we might earn probably enough to be able to pay someone's wage for 2 or 3 days to do something. But there's never actually, and there is an individual that supports us every month. And I can't name him because I don't know that I've got his permission to name him, but he's amazing. And, and he gives us an amount of money every month. It's for me, it's a massive amount of money. He's like, it's a little amount of money, but that money allows us to do so much every month. And I think if we had 4 or 5 people that gave us 50 quid a month, look what that would do for us, actually. And that's what you can do. That's the kind of thing that you can do, because that really makes a difference. That means that other people are given a lift up. That means that we see more people publicly. That means that we can train more people to be able to do more work. Even in the last year, because when I set up #IamIrish, as I said, it was a 2 fingers up. Since then, it's I've created a company that, and particularly because we've become such a voice, and so that is about hosting events, doing talk shops, workshops, and delivering training. And my hope is that, particularly with Irish organisations, that we can really work with Irish organisations to help them really understand representation within their organisations. Because it's not enough to say, I'm giving my money to an Irish group to go out and do their float on St. Patrick's Day. Look at who's on the float, look at that. Look at how, when we're looking, and I'm not saying that, because I was just about to say value for money, and I'm not saying that every individual that is within that is not valued. 1,000% they are valued. But we need more people to be able to see, to see what's needed in terms of equality, in terms of the world to be able to see us for who we are. The Ireland says it's the world of 1,000 welcomes, but actually it's not. And then people will say, but I've got a black friend and they've never experienced racism.
Yeah.
And I'm like, actually, maybe they're just grateful that they're not somewhere that's being bombed all the time. So they're just happy to be living somewhere where they may have a bit of spray paint on their windows that says blacks go home, but actually they're feeling like they can wash that off, and at least they've still got a window, rather than living somewhere where they're persecuted. And so, and most people want to just live. They want to just put their head down, and they want to live, and they want to work, and they want to contribute. They want just to be given a fair shot. And the same as we as Irish people have done throughout the world. We've gone abroad. There wasn't a place for me at the time in Ireland. I came to London to create a life for myself. And I'm delighted to be able to take some of the skills that I've learned throughout my years in London and bring them back home to Ireland to be able to share. I'm going to stop talking for a minute. You hear me? We're going horse, Mark.
Come here to me. I just think, obviously, there's a lot in what you said. And I think something that's, I'm going to talk about your time at Roundhouse and Clean Break and that work in London as well, because it's extraordinary. But you mentioned a few things there, and I'm kind of, to be honest with you, Lorraine, I'm kind of slightly speechless in what you said. But I think, you know, what you iterated there is so true in relation to, well, the word grateful is an absolute, you know, it's an abhorrent word in so much of the context that you're kind of talking about, being grateful for something. It's a really difficult word in that context, but also the idea of structural racism, because I think there is a complete lack of understanding of, I think generationally, I think it's probably more in an older, I don't mean older, but like, you know, I think it's different in some ways in the very younger generations now in Ireland, and you would hope that kind of just hope there. But just that sense of what's normal, and then what's normal can't be racist, if that makes sense. And that's, and certainly over the horrific, you know, the murder of Mr. Floyd in America last week, and the protests that are happening around that, and the, you know, there's a sense of, you know, that doesn't happen here. There's a sense of, why are people in Ireland marching? But also you mentioned, you know, the word class there back when you were talking about, you know, your own kind of use. And I think there's a kind of toxic mess then that we have here in Ireland, when you kind of have racism, class, church, all thrown into one kind of pot. And, you know, it's extraordinarily difficult, but I think it's time to really start unpacking what that means. And I think
sorry to interrupt you, but you know, even what's amazing with this, going back to the narratives that we were fed of the starving Black children. I mean, there's so much lies within that, Mark, because even for me, I was, you know, I grew up to think that I came from savages, and actually, you know, in very recent years, through doing my DNA, I've been able to trace who my family are. They're a really prominent Nigerian family who, you know, boast a lot of PhD holders. And when we look at the communities that there are in Ireland, when we look at the majority of the African community in Dublin in particular, all work in the tech world, or that, you know, that they're working to a really high level, really extremely educated people, but are yet working in jobs that are seen to be completely unskilled, if working at all, because if they're living in direct provision, they can't even go to work. And so we're constantly seeing, you know, people will look at them, and when we're looking at class, they see people that, you know, that they're wiping off the bottom of their shoe, rather than actually thinking that some of those people are really prominent people in the countries that they come from. And so even within their own class, they will have come from a particular class and will now be living in a very different place that they were. And so the feeling that they will have of the treatment they're having is multitude. You know, when we're looking at intersectionality, very few people really think about the complexities of, you know, if you're looking at delivering a holistic program or project for people, people are just not thinking outside of the box. They're thinking about a one cap fits all, which goes back to what I was talking about before about saying, yes, we're, you know, I hate the word diversity, so I don't even want to keep using it. But, you know, because for me, diversity is about power. Who holds the power? But when we're looking about inclusion and we're looking at representation, it goes back to what I was saying is that, you know, we're saying, yes, we want to open the doors. We want this artist to come and work with us. But actually, if you're going to be really flapping over someone because, you know, we need to make sure we're looking after this Black artist here, or make sure that they think we're not this, we're not that. No one wants that. People just want to be seen as a member of the team. They want a culture that's created, that understands if they decide that, you know, everyone in that building likes to wear blue and they come in wearing yellow, they're not flamboyant because they're wearing yellow, they just like to wear yellow. Or, you know, or they talk quite loud when they're talking. They're just having a laugh. They're just talking. They're not, you know. And I think about these stories even from my kids when they be talking about walking past it. Like I said, I've got 4 sons, they're between 21 and 32. And even as men, you know, there's one of them is an angel child now, but, you know, when they're younger, the 4 of them would be out together. And people would be looking at them like, you know, who's this? and clutching onto their handbag when they're walking down the street. What, because you see four men who now actually have got their own businesses and doing their own thing, but you thinking that they want your handbag with all that's in there is your rosary beads. They don't want your bag. They want your bag. Or the stories of, you know, a young black man trying to run after someone to give them back their phone because they've dropped it and they're running away from them, thinking that they're coming at, you know, stop thinking everyone's out to get you.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think there's, I mean, can you talk a bit about the I Am Irish piece? And you say Gary, you know, amazingly in the London Irish Centre, and you know, I say what a great man and place that is. But just your experience of that kind of, because it took off, and you know, we were blessed then to kind of develop a relationship with you, to bring it over here. And I think there's something really interesting in the conversations that also took off around that, Lorraine. If you want to kind of talk a bit about that.
Yeah, there was a lot of surprises about it, I think, Mark, and I had to take on a lot of responsibility around it because, like I said, it was something that I created as myself, as an artist, not just on my own. An amazing photographer, Tracy Anderson, worked with me and we collected oral histories at the time, and it was at that time about creating a portrait exhibition, not to put anyone's names to it, just that we had like a frame with people's surnames, just to say that the people that you see on these walls are Ireland's sons and daughters. Each of these people comes from an Irish family home. And it was at the time, and also I know a lot of the older mixed race Irish people were feeling really kind of alienated because or constantly being referred to as the new Irish, you know, and people like who were in their 80s and like, I was born in Ireland and you're still calling me new. And so as much as we want to embrace everybody, we wanted to be able to look at, I suppose, again, it was going back to really proving the point that everybody you see is not someone who's just arrived or someone who's come for a minute and is going, that some of the people that you see have a history in Ireland for thousands of years. So within the exhibition, everyone that was in the exhibition had Irish ancestry and were people who were really aligned to Ireland. You know, they're either born in Ireland or born to Irish parents, but still that was their culture, that's their heritage. You know, that was the strong heritage in their household was Irish. And I didn't really even want to tell their story. I mean, the stories, there were some amazing stories. But at the time, it wasn't even about telling the stories. It was just about, it was almost like a bit of a snub mark in that I don't even want to tell all of that. I just want you to just see, this is who they are. And I set up a Facebook page just so those people could see, you know, could see that there was more than just one. Because I remember even at the time, at the beginning, thinking, am I even going to know enough people? And when I had the idea, I suppose it was on the back burner for quite a while, but I wanted to do it, you know, a bit like, yeah, all singing, all dancing. We'll do this, we'll do a bit of theatre, we'll do a bit of that. And so, you know, all of those things were diluting the energy of it all. And I thought, no, let's just do this. Let's just put the photographic exhibition, and the rest will follow. But I thought, I suppose it was going to be a bit guerrilla in that we'd go in, we'd do the thing, and then, you know, we'd step away. But it connected with so many people, Mark, that people started contacting me from all over, like from Australia, from Nairobi. People started contacting me from everywhere and say, I've waited my whole life for this. Like, you're telling my story. Now, for a lot of us, we grew up in isolation. We hadn't met other people in that way before. And all of a sudden, we had this kind of, you know, thousands of people who were identifying in the same way. And I suppose the birth of I Am Irish came at that time, in that I couldn't just have like a one hit wonder. It needed to be more. It needed to be living and breathing. And I call it a movement, Mark, although we are now a not-for-profit company. I call it a movement because a movement can be led in any way by anybody. And I think it's become really obvious, particularly in Ireland, from the birth of #I'mIrish all the spin-offs that there has been and all the different projects that now are spinning up and the different voices that we're hearing because people felt empowered by that moment to be able to do their own work. And that's a tremendous legacy from that project. And it's something that would probably never be evidenced in that way. But for me, it feels really evident because, you know, when we're looking at the timeline, we can see, you know, where all of that has come from. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been other activistic work done over the years. I know, you know, particularly the Association of Mixed Race Irish have done great work with, you know, in highlighting the horrific abuse that there was within the industrial care homes in Ireland, and continue to champion and to do that. You know, Christine Buckley was another phenomenal woman, rest her soul, who did amazing work. But I think that the work of #I'mIrish, I suppose for me, was about a much broader reach, in that it was about really championing, tackling, and challenging those kind of perceptions of Irishness, what it looks like and what it sounds like to be Irish. Now, when I did the very first project, it was about Afro-Caribbean and white Irish, because I was telling my own story, I suppose. And I remember at the Irish Centre, so for me also, and that this is about being a kind of a community creative practitioner, that it's never just about the art, it's got to be about something else and about the connection, about the conversations. And so there was panelled events and workshops around that. And at one of those workshops, there was 33 people who identified as a different Irish mix, but all identified as being mixed race. And that was quite a kind of a powerful moment for me, because I hadn't even thought about that, because there was people around that circle who the outside world would have perceived to be white Irish, but they themselves were saying, I'm Irani and Irish, I'm Italian and Irish, I'm Swedish and Irish, or I'm English and Irish even. And then, as you say, you know, it was amazing to bring the work to Dublin, to the Access, to celebrate Black History Month 2017. That for me was a real kind of momentous, I was going to say event, but time, because it was like bringing this work home. And you know, you haven't been able to get rid of me since then, because
actually, Lorraine, I was talking to, I was on to Keith Gordon, Keith Wallace.
Keith, yeah. Playing games. Yeah.
I was kind of tweeting him kind of the other night and kind of just like similarly asking him how he was doing. And I mean, he was over here at the time with his amazing The Bitter Game show, which actually, you know, was in, you know, horrendously, you know, on the money kind of back then in relation to police violence in the States, and has even become more so now. But I suppose that was a kind of important time for us as well, because not only were those shows, you know, on our stages and on our walls, but there was also, you know, with our staff, with Emma and kind of Neve and Afrix here in involvement and kind of brilliant producing, there was a whole portfolio of kind of work, from working in local schools to working with local women's groups to also within the American Embassy having that amazing conversation, you know, with Keith yourself around the shows. And I think that's what really attracted me to your work, that it kind of, obviously the context and the artistry behind it, but also that kind of passion. And I've been reflecting on that a lot, well, in the last week particularly, and in relation to the context within the community in which Access kind of sits, and the fit that kind of, well, I personally felt with that kind of work. But just, I mean, you mentioned something before we started recording here about feeling winded in relation to what's after happening, and you know, the horrendous videos that have been shown of George Floyd's murder and lots of other, you know, things that have emerged since. And I think there's very few words that I can kind of put into this discussion, other than kind of, you know, it must be so difficult being able to express something that doesn't become a conversation about systems, because it is, and that's what you have spoken about for years. It's like, yes, obviously there's horrendous stuff going on, but it's not like this stuff hasn't been happening since the formation of
hundreds of years. It's the thing. This is the thing, Marcus. It has been going on for hundreds of years. But it goes back to what I've been saying. You know, at the moment there is loads of resources out there about where people can go to educate themselves. Books you can read. There's all of that. But what's the point in reading all of the books if you're not going to put things into action? And something that has become quite a motto of mine, actually, Mark, is I won't accept your apology on its own. I want to see actions. And so people can say, we're really sorry till the cows come home, but I want to see people living better, not just saying it, not just being out on the streets protesting, not just reading the book. Do something, help to educate a wider pool of people. When you see something, call it out. Don't be complicit in it. All the kind of racist jokes that you're hearing, the derogative language that's used. Think about the things that you're going to watch in the cinema. Thinking about how you talk about it. Think about music. Think about the worlds that we're living in. Think about how you can do better, how your children can do better. Mark, there's people that I know who are amazing advocates for inclusion and representation. But if I ask them, how many people of African descent have been to your house for dinner? A lot of them will tell me zero. So how would your children ever know any better if they've never met anybody? You know, so, and you're meeting people from work, and I'm not suggesting that because you meet someone from work, you have to bring them home. I'm not suggesting that at all. But you know, you have to find ways of people being able to have full understandings of the world, and not just from what you're reading in a book, because you've got access to it, particularly if you're living in like a major city in any kind of country now. You'll see that there are people that look different to other people, and it's okay. It's okay. And I think the thing is that people have a really skewed understanding of what equal opportunities means. Equal opportunities is not about equality on that level. Equal opportunities is about creating opportunities so that people are given the opportunity to be able to move, to climb, to break the glass ceilings. It's about all of those opportunities. Even when you think, Mark, about the arts, and you think, like, how many people would be willing to give up their job for somebody else, to create a space for somebody else? You know, it's probably zero people, you know, that will say to you, yeah, you know what, I would really be willing right now to give up this promotion to actually give this place to somebody who is working at this level. And, you know, I met, actually, at the time when I came to Access, I went and did a talk at the Irish Embassy at the Department of Foreign Affairs. And I remember a group of women telling me they had never met a mixed race Irish woman of my age. They just had never met one. And so when we're looking at representation, when we're looking at the leaders in the country, when we're looking at the leaders, who are the leaders? I mean, to be honest with you, we're just getting to it in the UK when we're looking at having kind of leaders of arts organisations who come from African descent, who are of African descent. But the arts and what Afro-Caribbean, the community, adds to the arts in the UK is, you know, when we look at the economic value of that, it's just like phenomenal. We've got all of that in Ireland, but, you know, we need to be creating those opportunities. We need to be creating internships, traineeships. We need to be looking at funding the right kind of places, even for funders. You know, when you think about the hoops that you've got to go through to get funding for a particular project, the people who are funding, they can see it doesn't take very much to go onto social media and see who the movers and shakers are. Approach people, work with people to help them create projects, rather than people always having to create a project that fits into a particular funding stream or gap. Look at the kind of work that is innovative. Look at the grassroots work. Look at individuals. Look at communities. Communities always know what the problems are in their own communities. you know, help them to be able to work on those problems rather than thinking, oh, I'll come in and I'll bring this to them. You know, stop being the savior. Think about, ask people what they need rather than feeling like you're going to come in and sort it all out for them.
I mean, there's a couple of things there that, you know, you said something that just cut to the chase for me, like about equality, that it's not enough to create the opportunities, it's to create the aspiration in generations. And I think what happens so much in Ireland, and I think there's an opportunity to move beyond it now, but that when there's a push for equality or when there's a push for inclusion, that sometimes people start infighting then about who should get the inclusion first, which is playing into the hands of those that have the power, rather than seeing that the alliances are there among all the excluded. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, and I think that's, you know, it's manifest in so many different ways and walks of our life. But Lorraine, in relation to what's going on at the moment, in relation to the horrific, you know, illegal, you know, all, you know, immoral, call it what you like, and the inability of people, I think we're in a shock phase, certainly, you know, about kind of what's going on. But I think there's no shock from other quarters because, as I said, it's life. And that,
I've been over shock a long time ago. Shock is not what I'm feeling.
But that's what I mean, and I think that there's a privilege in shock. Do you know what I mean? There's a privilege.
Yeah, there is.
And I think that's what's kind of, very, very, very difficult to take, actually, because you're kind of, it's not about me. It's about me and what I can do to support and resource and learn. But it's about actually, you know, who the hell fucking couldn't listen and see what's going on now? It's right there. So in order, that can't go away anywhere. Do you know what I mean?
And people still, like, you still see the racism within all of that, Mark. Like, if someone says to me again about white lives matter, like, I'm not a violent person by any means, but you know, I really got to be calling this out. Nobody is saying that because you're white you don't matter. Of course you flipping matter. Do you not even value yourself? But black lives are in danger right now. In danger. Like, we're having to deal with this onslaught day in, day out, thinking about our children, thinking about our grandchildren, thinking about the generations that are coming. I came from a white mother, for God's sake. I have to even hold it because I'm just like, I'm feeling emotions that maybe I thought I had them under wraps, Mark. Maybe I thought I had them under wraps because I'm just like, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of people not seeing me, not seeing the person that's standing behind me or behind them or behind them or behind them. Like, how can you not see what's in front of your flipping face? It's been there for years. Slavery went on for over 400 friggin' years. 400. Now, we're not saying that nobody else has had a plight in the world. Of course, we know. We can see. We know what's going on.
Yeah.
We know what's going on. We come from Ireland, for God's sake. We know. We even know, you know, on a personal level, people in Ireland know what oppression looks like, knows what oppression feels like, knows what starvation feels like. We know it's there. So why can't we be better allies? Like, why can we not be better allies? How can we not understand this? How can we not see this? How can we not want to do better? How can we not want to be better? How can we not want to?
Yeah, and I think I think you're absolutely right. And now it needs to really, and I just said at the beginning of this, it now needs to move on to the how. Do you know what I mean? Because I think right, you know, I think us kind of going, oh, this is not fucking right, it's not fucking right. Great, but like, what then? Because you don't want something else to be coming along in 2 weeks' time where it's this now and it's that now and it's, you know. And I think, because I said to you, I thought we thought long and hard about having this interview today because I didn't want to kind of be in any way kind of virtue signaling in relation to, you know, our relationship. But I think it's very, very important that it's kind of the moment in time now, born out of a horrific act, you know, on the back of many thousands of horrific acts, But for that to have any legacy, now has to be the time in every society to kind of put in new structures or to even explore new structures. So how do we move on from this?
I mean, I think what's interesting, Mark, because we've been having these conversations for the last year. That's why I'm even at your table. Do you know what I mean? I know from a point of Access that Access has been critically aware of these issues for a very long time. And ahead of the game, I would say, in some ways, in terms of the conversations that we've certainly had. But this weekend, I was part of a women's network, a global women's network, you know, speaking to women who are on the front line in the States and the Caribbean, like across the world. And we were thinking about, you know, what we can do when we're looking kind of more strategically about what we can do long term. But at the end of that meeting, I just felt like, you know what, I'm so sick of talking. Like, the talk is done now for me. It is time for action. It's time for us to really be able to implement. And I think I'm really excited about the artist residency that I'm doing in Access, because I think that that will give us a real great opportunity over the coming months to really unravel some of that stuff, Mark, and to be able to have a look at whatever bits of good practice that there is, that we can share, that we can embed, that we can grow, that we can cultivate, so that we can give something to the arts world, certainly in Ireland. And the hope for me is that other organisations also look. I mean, you know, organisations need to be looking to the arts more for what they need to do anyway, because the arts are some way in. Sorry, my computer, my laptop keeps beeping. Are some way to. They're a bit more woke. They're a bit more woke. But it's been able to even use that visibility to be able to work with the wider community, to be able to really embed. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, me alone or me and you or me and you and 10 other people are going to have all the answers. What I do know is that there's lots of amazing work that is happening all over the world, but it's often happening in isolation. So there needs to be a way for us to really have a wider view over all of that, and to look at how we embed. I think that particularly in Ireland, Mark, there's a lot of work to be done within education, like a lot of work to be done within education. As part of, I realise that I haven't really kind of talked about what hashtag I am Irish is. So if anybody is interested, I realise I've got this behind me, but this was actually from, we had the first ever Black History Month event at the Irish Embassy in London in October, which was phenomenal, actually. So this is part of that. But all of my socials are I am Blirish. That's Black Irish. BL Irish. I am Blirish. So check that out. But oh my gosh, I've actually even lost my own educators. As part of that, we have quite a kind of following on social media. And because actually we're like a minority within a minority within a minority, because, you know, being mixed in itself makes you a minority. And then all of the other kind of little mixes within all of that. But one of the things that I realized over the years, and I picked it up a lot, Mark, when I was doing the work through Access, you know, when I was on the kind of residency with I Am Irish, and we did all the talks in schools and stuff. After every conversation, someone would call me to the side and say, my grandchild's mother is from, or, you know, I have a cousin who's got a child who's, and I got this, and it's almost like the whisper, because nobody wants to really own it out. And, or someone saying, you know, my sister is having a terrible time, because nobody else culturally understands what, you know, or my sister doesn't know what to do with the child's hair. And so recently we decided to create a space, a private space on Facebook for Irish parents and grandparents of mixed race Irish children to connect and just be able to talk. And one of the other administrators on there is a white Irish mum who has complete understanding, because I would say I have understanding, but actually I don't even have that understanding, because I'm an Irish mum of mixed children and grandchildren, but I'm not a white Irish mum. So, you know, I have some understanding, but she has a different understanding of that. but we wanted to ensure that we brought that together. But the stories that we hear over and over and over are of educational institutes that just have no understanding, just don't know. Children who are experiencing racism in school and are actually being told by people in those schools, maybe their school is not for that child. Or, you know, do we have to be making a song and dance about it? Do we, I'm actually wearing this badge today that was given by Dr. Cindy Joyce, that represents Maher. And I remember having a conversation with Cindy about often some of the challenges that there are between children who are from the Maher, or what I didn't know at the time, you know, I would have called the traveller group, and young people who were coming from Afro-Caribbean backgrounds, and often challenges between them in the schools, and the schools really not having any understanding of how to deal with that, to be able to resolve those kind of issues. But of course, both of those groups of young people are both experiencing exclusion in lots of other ways. And so there's actually so much about them that can you know, so much that we can even think about in a conversation about how you unite those voices, rather than keeping those voices really excluded and causing even bigger rifts between those kind of communities. So I think that education is key, and I know that certainly even as part of those conversations, I remember going into primary schools. I remember, like, you know, some of the really little ones, and when they'd say to me, you know, my mummy's from here and my dad's from here, and I remember a little kid, actually, one little girl going, my parents are just from Dublin. And, you know, and the joy that it brought me when she said that, it's like feeling like there was something, anyway.
Yeah.
But I just think that there is a real need within education for because, you know, they've got all these kind of schemes, they've got all the policies, but what good is a policy if it doesn't stand on its legs? Well, we want to be able to see, you know, and that's where I go back to, you know, no apologies without action. I want to be able to see it in people's actions, not just in what they say, because people talk a good talk, but they're not walking a good walk.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. We have enough policies, actually. We have loads of good policies. And I think, you know, from hearing you both speak, and it's great the Arts Council did launch the policy, yourself and Cindy kind of spoke of that. And I suppose the funding for, just to give a bit of the context, the funding for your residency here, is it to explore the identity, other space within the arts, and the difficulties and the dangers of repatronizing, and the dangers of kind of re-outing or re-ostracizing. So that's a very exciting space, both from, say, you know, the Ballymun community and the different communities that kind of live within that, but also in the wider arts field. But I think you're what you said there around I Am Irish, and kind of every time I speak to you, and particularly kind of today, just the insidious nature of racism in this country. And it's not just Ireland; it's kind of everywhere. But I can only really speak for the country in which I kind of live and experience. But it's kind of outing that, and kind of, you know, being not okay with it, but being okay about exploring it. It doesn't mean the whole country of Ireland is going to fall apart because we suddenly, you know, own this issue. But I think, yeah, it's and you know, your experiences. Have talked to me often about I Am Irish kind of exploding, you know, into something, and you know, you're in part as well, like, you know, at the heart of it, it's just you. So you're kind of, I know you have other people now that kind of work with you, but to take on that, and this is something that I'm always interested in with kind of, you know, individual artists, to take also as part of their art, to be kind of foisted a leadership role within that's a very tricky space to inhabit.
It's massive, Mark, because the thing is then you become the authority on something that wasn't what I signed up to in the first place. Do you know what I mean? And often, like, creatives, we're great at creating. We're not all always great at the writing of it, or, you know, doing the funding applications, or even being able to document it in that kind of way. Because, like, for years, I'm Irish, and people would write to me and talk about your team. And even now, actually, like, we're not funding projects. There's no money for anything. And often, if I take on a particular piece of work, whatever money comes from it, I pay to other people to deliver, or because I believe that if someone can be paid, that we should be paying, but I'm also really guilty of saying to someone, oh, just one more thing. Can we just have this one conversation? Because I feel like the work needs to be done. And even when I created it in the beginning, I was like, you know, I remember a friend saying to me that you'll definitely get funding from that. And I'm like, I just want to do it. I just want to do it. So I'll pay for it myself because I just want to do it. And I'm not, you know, I don't earn that much. But the idea of creating the not-for-profit company was to deliver training. And so that organizations were given the opportunity to be able to be socially conscious, because by buying in the training, it was paying back into the work that we would do with communities. And that would enable us to be able to do the work. Because I think also when we look at funding streams, there's so many amazing organizations that are constantly in competition for the same small pots of money. So I wanted to look at another kind of model of sustainability. But still, everything that we do is, it is me at the heart of it. And I bring in volunteers to support, you know, whatever else that needs to be done. And so that even in itself shows me that, you know, there are amazing people, but there's only so many times that you can ask somebody to do something for nothing. And unfortunately, the same people who are willing to do something for nothing are always willing to do something for nothing. So they're the ones that deserve to be paid even more.
I think you've just described the wider art sector there very,
yeah,
very.
Well, you know, I know you know this.
But I think, but Lorraine, also what people should know is you're doing this on top of a job. You know, you work for.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I think that's kind of like, it's like, oh, isn't it great all that she does? But you know, you're working for a brilliant organization. Talk about the organization that you work for, Lorraine.
So I work for Clean Break Theatre Company. I'm the participation manager, and Clean Break is an organisation that's been going for about 40 years. It was created by two women who were doing time in prison. At the time, I mean, it's really quite interesting because 40 years ago, within the British criminal justice system, a lot of the women that were going to prison had links to the IRA because women just weren't seen as offenders. So a lot of it was you know, they were being locked up for political activity at that time. Not just those women, but you know. Anyway, it was set up at the time. And what's interesting also is those two women got support from the London Irish Centre to get the company off the ground. So I feel quite honoured to be in that space. But the company itself tells the stories and supports women who've been affected by the criminal justice system. I mean, follow Clean Break on Twitter because it is an amazing organisation, and it's the only organisation of its kind in the UK, certainly. There's other organisations now that do similar work, but Clean Break is an all-female company driven, you know, by some incredible women, and those that identify as women. And that is my day job, and also a kind of part of my heart, because, you know, the women that we work with on a day-to-day basis are just incredible. You know, the journeys that those women have been on are absolutely incredible. So we work with women who, some of those may be still within the secure system, either in prison or secure hospitals, or those that are in the community and those that are at risk of that, or women that have been affected through mental health or addiction. And, you know, we work with women 17 to, I think my oldest student, I remember actually was an Irish woman who was in her 70s who had a PhD. And I remember running a project, and it was actually around kind of using the arts to go back to work. And I remember thinking, what the hell am I going to teach this woman? Like, what am I going to teach this woman? You know, that was quite incredible. But I come across some really amazing artists, because they're all artists once they come into the organisation. I mean, we also work, you know, alongside artists who don't have lived experience, people who will have been working professionally as writers or actors, directors. But what's really beautiful about the company, in the last few years, there has been a change. I wasn't the education manager before being the participation manager, because at that time we ran an education program for women with lived experience, whereas now the work is much more integrated, and it's really, and looking at being really nimble and disruptive and really being able to bring those voices in. There's quite an amazing, there's loads of amazing projects, actually. There's so many amazing projects that the company's doing. But at the moment, there's a team of writers who have been paired with women with lived experience to just think about either their stories or I mean, this is just an example of the kind of work, but they're pairs of artists who are just going to tell incredible stories that really, and that for me really feeds into representation, into inclusion, into giving a voice, into creating those really level playing fields that we've been talking about this morning. You know, it is about giving people real opportunities. But one of the other things, Mark, that we've been talking about, and I kind of reflect on my work at Clean Break when I think about this, is about kind of stigma and stigmatization, because those artists, as they go on their journey, become, you know, they may have come with particular experiences, but they certainly, when, you know, when they're ready to go to work within the world of creativity, they're you know, they're an actor, or they're a writer, or they're a director. Why do they constantly have to be like a, you know, I think it's important that we understand about working class arts, or about benefits arts, or, you know, it's really important that we understand that, because there is an imbalance, and so we need to understand how we redress the imbalance. But people should be able to just be seen with what they bring to the table. And there's something quite rich that people bring when they bring a lived experience, regardless of what the lived experience is, because they're telling real stories that connect with real everyday people. And actually, sometimes they're just phenomenal artists. They, you know, their craft is amazing. And so we should just be able to see people as who they are within the arts, you know. And a conversation, you know, always, anyone that knows me will have heard me say before, will have an understanding of it. It's like, who puts the quality on this? You know, who says that this is what's good enough, or you know, you know, you went to, I'm talking as myself now, not as someone who works for anybody, but you know, who says if you go to this drama school or that drama school? And I'm not saying that, I'm not an advocate for that, because I think if that's part of your journey, then I think you certainly need to take that journey. But it isn't a one cap fits all. That's what's so incredible about the arts, is that it's something you can come to at any time, at any age, be in whatever size, whatever look. There's always going to be an audience for you. There's always going to be a place for you. And I know, you know, over the years, when you, particularly when you're working with people who identify as being non-actors or non-creatives, and they're in a space and you just think, oh gosh, how are we going to? And then they always pull it out of the bag and just, you know, again, it's looking at quality over quantity, and what it is that we're looking at as art. Because being able to see someone who walks through the door and can't even have eye contact with somebody, and watching them just stand up and say their own name, that for somebody is success.
Yeah. And
it's looking at that. It's how do we, you know, when we're thinking about the arts and we're thinking about what success looks like, or, you know, we often see even in the fields, those that get seen a lot are those that talk a good talk. For me, I want to be walking the good walk. You know, there's a lot of work that I do that I don't tell people about. Even like my nearest and dearest, my partner's always saying to me, you know, tell me about what you're doing at work. For me, it's just part of what I do. It's not about the, you know, all the glory of it all. And yet we do. There's some people that are really good at going to all of the networking events. I'm not a hobnobber. I'm kind of a bit socially awkward, always thinking I'm going to say the wrong thing. I mean, I think that again comes back to those kind of feelings of being on the outside of it, not really wanting to be in the heart of it all. So you'll always find me against the wall at the back somewhere, where there's probably someone else who's really interesting, who also is the person that wants to be at the back by the wall, and we'll be having chats. But I'm not that natural, like, I've arrived, darling. That's not who I am. That's not who I am. And they're often the people that get all the kind of accolades or get seen because they're great at like blowing their own trumpet. And I'm not taking away, because some of them are great, but there's also like a wealth of people out there, or, you know, even, and this goes back to what I was saying before about my mother not really knowing, rest of soul, what I do. Because for her coming to London to go to the theatre, it's always about West End, what's on in the West End. No idea of like Fringe or, you know, or anything else that's actually going out there. They just have no idea of the different kind of work that's happening. And I remember even one time my son saying they had a play come to school, and my mother was like, Jesus, all of what, they're coming from the West End, and they go, you know, into the school. I'm like, no, actually, no, you know, it's completely different, but not having an understanding of that.
Come here, I won't keep you much longer. And it's worth saying actually that another Irish connection and clean break. Roisin McBrien.
Roisin, yeah, of course, yeah. Our lovely Roisin. Actually, we've got a good Irish contingency.
Absolutely. Before I let you go, and also it's worth saying, like last year we did a kind of research project with us on people homeless living in hotels in Ireland, and kind of it's fascinating to kind of around loneliness and around that complete disconnect, you know. And I think there's an awful lot that we are going to be kind of setting off to talk about. But I think I just want to say today, it's just great to chat to you, Lorraine. And it's kind of, I suppose, it's kind of, you know, I'm kind of, my television is kind of constantly on at home at the moment. I'm trying to explain to my kids who are kind of, you know, teenagers or pre-teens about what's going on in America, and they're so clued in. And it's funny, they don't see, you know, they've an awful lot of, you know, black friends and mixed race friends in school, and they don't see the difference, which is so heartening that they don't see that difference. But yet they're looking at television at, you know, a state kind of, you know. And I suppose that's what I'm finding to be honest with you, that's what I'm finding very difficult, is how to explain that.
Well, I think first and foremost you need to turn off the telly, because all of that, you know, the television and all of that we're absorbing from all of that, no one needs that kind of trauma, because once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And that kind of constant reminder of that sets the tone for where we're looking at these things. I think what's really important is to kind of start the conversations about equality, and the conversations about you know, just on a real basic level, it's kind of culture, Mark. You know, when you go to other countries, like what's okay for one person is not okay for somebody else. Even when you look at you know, my daughter-in-law got a part-time job in Harrods at one time, and she was telling me about all the education they were given about, you know, if they have Chinese customers, they quite like this color, or they like this number of things. And these are kind of important things for us just to know. Just, you know, if you're going abroad somewhere, if one of your kids was going to live in another country abroad for a number of years, you'd work with them to kind of think about the things that they need to know. What are the local laws? What, you know, it's all of those kind of things. Yeah. And it's just kind of even starting those conversations with people, and being real with them about the roles that there were. But I think what's equally important is, as much as teaching your children things about slavery, it's really important to teach them about all the kings and queens that there was in Africa, where diamonds come from, you know, where all of our resources come from. Well, even when we look at the animal kingdom, those conversations are what's really important, so that your children can start kind of thinking outside of those narratives that we're seeing just constantly about all of the, and it's really important that they understand inequality, but as well as seeing all the horrendous things that are happening, that they understand the worth of the people that you're talking about. Because this is part of the problem why people can detach themselves, because they don't place the right worth on the life of a black person, so that they can remove themselves from it. They can look and they can say, that's terrible, but what's that got to do with me? Because they don't place the same value or the same worth on somebody because of the narratives that we've been fed. And it's about changing that kind of balance, Mark.
Yeah, okay. Lorraine, thanks so much for joining me today. I look forward to spending many times over cups of teas and fish and chips with you over the next few months, and hopefully get to see you in person soon after this.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You might be sorry you've invited me in this time, Mark. There's a little can of worms that's been exploding now.
No, never ever. Listen, go on. Talk to you soon.
You too, Mark. Thank you.
Bye.